Have you ever stopped to reflect on something truly disturbing? What if I told you that you were never born and will never die? Does it seem absurd, maybe even impossible to accept? But is the concept of birth and death as we understand it in fact reality? Imagine for a moment, what if your life was not a straight line from birth to death, but an eternal cycle that repeats itself infinitely? The idea that we are trapped in a loop of existence, where what we call the beginning and the end are just limited perceptions of our mind. If you are ready to challenge everything you know about time, life, and death, prepare yourself. In this video, we will explore one of the greatest mysteries of humanity, the true nature of our existence. We will travel from philosophy to physics, from consciousness to spirituality, and demystify what it really means to live and die. Before we begin, I want to ask you to like this video, share it with those who you think will benefit from this reflection, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any updates on how you can improve your mind and expand your view of the world. Leave a comment sharing your opinion on what it means to be born and to die for you. Let's embark on this journey together and see what we discover. What does it really mean to be born and to die? When we think of birth, our mind immediately evokes the image of a newborn baby, with the first cry and the beginning of a physical life. Death, in turn, is seen as the end of that journey, a definitive closure. However, are these definitions complete? And if we are wrong, what does this mean for what we really are? Birth is traditionally seen as the moment when life begins, but this view is limited. From a scientific point of view, the birth of a human being is just the beginning of a biological cycle that was already in progress. Before we take our first breath, we already existed as cells and molecules in constant transformation. You, as an individual, are not a unique event, but the endpoint of a long chain of processes. Your atoms and molecules existed before you were born and will continue to exist after your death. This leads us to question, are you really born? From a philosophical point of view, birth and death are concepts constructed by the human mind to make sense of the chaos of life. If we look at the spiritual traditions of different cultures, death is often seen not as an end, but as a transition to another state of existence. For example, the concept of reincarnation suggests that death is just a step within a continuous cycle of rebirth and evolution of the soul. For many indigenous cultures, death is seen as a natural part of the cycle of life, where ancestors continue to influence the world of the living. Therefore, if life is not just a simple straight line between birth and death, what are we really? Science and philosophy suggest that in reality, we are more than this limited cycle. Perhaps we are just experiencing a moment within a timeless flow, where our existence never begins or ends, but simply continues in different forms and states. The true essence of life is not found in the moments we mark as birth and death, but in the continuous flow of existence. Like a wave in the ocean, you may be just a peak that rises to the surface for a brief instant, but your energy is never lost. It just transforms, reinvents itself, and merges again with the whole. The Greek philosopher Heraclitus, who lived about 2,500 years ago, stated something that still resonates deeply today. Everything flows, nothing remains. For Heraclitus, the universe is in a constant state of change, and there is nothing that is fixed or immutable. He compared reality to a river into which it would never be possible to step into the same flowing water twice. Everything is in motion, and time, like the river, does not flow backward. This idea seems to align perfectly with the notion that life is a continuous flow, where birth and death, as we understand them, are just fleeting points within a vast ocean of existence. For Heraclitus, the ideas of beginning and end are constructs of our limited minds, trying to understand a universe that in reality is always in transformation. The philosopher stated that we cannot understand the world in terms of statics because nothing remains as it is. This challenging view not only contradicts our traditional conception of birth and death, but also sheds light on the concept of time. What we call time is, according to Heraclitus, just a way of measuring this constant change. If time is not a linear flow, as our perception suggests, then the idea that we are born and die within this context loses meaning. What is really happening is that we are in constant transformation, but we never begin or end. We just transform from one form to another. Thus, every moment of your life, from birth to death, is not an isolated event, but part of an eternal dance of creation and destruction. Each end is simply a transition to something new, and this cycle is infinite. Heraclitus also introduced the concept of the unity of opposites, where chaos and order, birth and death coexist and complement each other. Without death, life would have no meaning. Without birth, there would be no impetus for change. In this sense, life and death are not opposites, but parts of a single dynamic whole. What we see as the end of a phase is just the beginning of another. By reflecting on the ideas of Heraclitus, we can begin to realize that the loop of existence in which we are immersed is not a closed cycle of birth and death, but a continuous flow of change and transformation. Life is a series of transitions, without a true separation between one state and another. When we delve deeper into science, we discover that the way we understand time is even more complex and challenging than we imagined. Modern physics, especially Albert Einstein's theory of relativity, offers us a radically different view of time, which can help us understand how existence extends beyond our traditional concept of birth and death. Einstein showed through his equations that time is not absolute and immutable as we always thought. It is relative and flexible, depending on speed and gravity. In other words, time does not pass the same way for everyone. The famous equation EmC2, which relates energy, mass, and the speed of light, not only reveals how matter and energy are interconnected, but also helps us understand that time can be distorted depending on our position in the universe. Imagine this in a simpler way. In a theoretical experiment, if you traveled in a spaceship at a speed close to the speed of light, time would pass much slower for you compared to a person on Earth. This phenomenon is known as time dilation. According to the theory of relativity, gravity can also distort time, causing it to pass slower in regions of strong gravitational fields, such as near a black hole. So, what does this mean for the concept of birth and death? If time is something malleable, it may be that the linear perception of time from birth to death is an illusion created by our limited perception. What we call life and death may be just a small slice of a timeless flow that extends beyond our understanding. The idea that time is relative can also align with philosophical notions of cycles of existence. Just as a drop of water is part of the river, our existence may be just a part of an eternal cycle in which time bends and merges instead of following a straight line from birth to death. Einstein's physics suggests that time may not be the linear path we imagine. It may in fact be a malleable dimension where past, present and future coexist and interconnect. Therefore, if time is flexible and not linear, the cycle of life and death may also be a construct based on our limited perception. Birth and death may be momentary events within a continuous flow, and perhaps we have not truly been born or truly died. Perhaps we are just going through a specific phase in this cosmic cycle that never ends. One of the biggest questions humanity has ever asked is, where do we come from and where are we going? These questions have been addressed by philosophers, scientists, and spiritualists throughout history. And although each of these areas has its own interpretation, they all seem to point to the idea of a continuous cycle where life and death are not isolated points, but rather parts of an uninterrupted flow. From a biological perspective, life is understood as a sequence of processes that begin with the formation of cells, go through the multiplication of organisms, and culminate in the decline of matter with death. However, death is not a definitive end. The human body, like all matter, follows the laws of thermodynamics. Energy is never destroyed, it only transforms. The energy that makes up your atoms and molecules will continue to exist, transforming into new beings, new processes, new cycles. This cycle of life and death is repeated on infinite scales, as if it were part of a universal mechanism where nothing really disappears. It only transforms. When you die, your atoms are redistributed, and part of your vital energy is transferred to other life forms, perhaps to a tree, an animal, or even another person. Matter does not die, it simply changes form, perpetuating the cycle of life. For those seeking a more spiritual understanding, many traditions suggest that life is a journey of the soul which passes through various states and incarnations. The idea of reincarnation, present in Hinduism, Buddhism, and many indigenous cultures, states that death is not the end of the soul, but a transition to a new cycle of existence. The soul, therefore, has no beginning or end. It moves from one body to another, going through experiences of learning and evolution. Death in this context is just a stage in a continuous process of spiritual transformation. Even more fascinating is the theory of cosmic cycles, suggesting that the universe, like life, goes through cycles of creation and destruction. The Big Bang and Big Crunch model of modern cosmology proposes that the universe may be in an eternal cycle of expansion and contraction, a kind of cosmic breath, where, after a great expansion, the universe shrinks and returns to its primordial state, only to explode again in a new cycle of creation. This concept of cosmic cycles aligns perfectly with the ideas of cyclical life that we see in many ancient cultures. Perhaps the idea of life and death is just an illusion, a reflection of a universal cycle that encompasses everything, from matter to spirit. What we call the end is not the end of everything, but just a transition to the next stage of the cosmic journey, where everything that dies is, in fact, reborn. Therefore, the true answer to where are we going is perhaps as mysterious as the very origin of life. We are not going to a distant place, but we are being continuously transformed, passing from one form to another on an eternal journey through the cycles of existence. The idea that life does not begin or end with physical birth and death is deeply rooted in many spiritual and religious traditions. In various parts of the world, beliefs in reincarnation and eternal life are not just philosophical or symbolic concepts, but foundations that shape how people perceive their existence, their purpose, and the ultimate destiny of their soul. In Hinduism, one of the oldest religions in the world, reincarnation is a central principle. For Hindus, the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth is known as samsara, and the soul, or Atman, never dies. It continues to reincarnate until it achieves liberation or moksha, when the soul unites with the divine and transcends the cycle of birth and death. In this context, death is not seen as an end, but merely as a transition. The soul continues its journey, accumulating wisdom and experiences throughout the various lives. In Buddhism, the concept of reincarnation is also fundamental, but with a different emphasis. For Buddhists, the cycle of rebirth, known as samsara, is driven by desire and attachment. The ultimate goal is not simply to achieve eternal life or a fixed state of existence, but to achieve nirvana, a state of enlightenment where the cycle of rebirths is broken. As in Hinduism, death is seen as part of a continuous process, but the liberation of the soul is the ultimate goal, a transcendence that goes beyond any form of material existence. In Greek philosophy, Thinkers like Plato and Pythagoras also believed in the immortality of the soul and the possibility of reincarnation. Plato, for example, spoke of metempsychosis, the idea that the soul transmigrates to another body after death, with the aim of achieving greater perfection. For him, death was not an end, but an opportunity for the soul to reach a higher level of wisdom and truth. In the Abrahamic traditions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, eternal life takes on a different meaning. Although reincarnation is not a central concept in these religions, the idea of eternal life in a spiritual plane is deeply important. In Christianity, for example, the resurrection at the end of time is a promise of eternal life for those who have faith in God. For Muslims, paradise, Jannah, is the final destination of virtuous souls after death, where they will live in a state of eternal happiness. Even without a clear concept of reincarnation, the Abrahamic traditions share the belief in an afterlife, where the soul continues its existence in some way, regardless of physical death. This suggests that, for these traditions, physical death is just a transition to another form of existence, where the cycle of life transforms into an eternal plane of spiritual experience. This concept of eternal life, whether through reincarnation or spiritual continuity after death, challenges us to reconsider how we understand the concept of the end. What we call death may, in fact, be a mere transition between different states of existence and not the definitive end of our journey. If death is just a transition and the life cycle is a continuous flow, then what is the role of consciousness in this process? What in fact makes us live, and how does our perception of life and death fit into a universe that never ceases to evolve? The answer may be deeper than we imagine, and it involves the concept of an eternal observer. Consciousness, in many philosophical and spiritual traditions, is seen not merely as a function of the brain or mind, but as something more profound, a fundamental aspect of reality. In various schools of thought, consciousness is described as something that transcends the physical body, being the part of us that observes, experiences, and interacts with the world, but that, in some way, does not die. It is as if consciousness were a flame that never goes out. It simply adapts and transforms as the cycle of life and death unfolds. From a scientific perspective, neuroscience attempts to understand consciousness as a product of neural interactions in the brain. However, even the most renowned scientists agree that the true nature of consciousness is still a mystery. The famous physicist Roger Penrose, for example, suggests that consciousness may be more than just brain activity, perhaps being a quantum phenomenon, a fundamental property of the universe that transcends the limitations of the physical body. If this is true, consciousness would, in fact, be eternally connected to the cosmos, in a state of continuous observation, beyond the limits of death. This leads us to think that perhaps consciousness does not depend on a body to exist. It could be a fundamental force, present before birth and after death, that permeates the universe. At the moment we are born, this consciousness attaches itself to our body, allowing us to live and experience the world, but it is not limited to this. It is in constant flow, observing and experiencing the universe from a timeless perspective. The idea that consciousness is eternal also aligns with many spiritual traditions. In Advaita Vedanta, a school of Hindu philosophy, for example, universal consciousness is seen as the ultimate reality. This consciousness is not affected by the physical changes of the world, nor by death. It is immortal, and all experiences of life and death are just temporary manifestations of this consciousness. The cycle of birth and death in this sense is not the end of consciousness, but only a momentary transformation of its expression. The notion of an eternal observer also connects with concepts from quantum physics. According to the Copenhagen interpretation proposed by Niels Bohr and Werner Heisenberg, the universe is indeterminate until an observation is made. In this sense, the simple act of observing the world seems to be what shapes reality. Consciousness, then, is not just a spectator, but the creator of reality, and its essence is not limited to the physical body. It exists independently of our temporal perceptions of life and death. If our consciousness is eternal, it means that the I we experience in each life, with all its emotions, thoughts, and memories, is just a temporary manifestation of this cosmic consciousness, a unique expression in an endless cycle of changes. When we die, what happens is that this manifestation of consciousness returns to the universal flow, only to return again in another form or in another space. Throughout history, science and spirituality have often been seen as opposites, with science seeking rational, evidence-based answers, while spirituality often appealed to mysteries and transcendent truths. However, as we explore the concepts of time, life, death, and existence, we begin to realize that both may, in fact, be more connected than we imagine. Modern physics, with its theories about the universe and the nature of time, offers a profound perspective that aligns with many spiritual traditions. For example, the concept that the universe is cyclical and in constant transformation is a principle of both science and spirituality. In the cosmological model of the Big Bang, we believe that the universe had a beginning approximately 13.8 billion years ago, but the Big Crunch theory suggests that it may end in a similar way, contracting back to a singular point. This creates a view of the universe as something that is born and dies repeatedly, a continuous spiral of creation and destruction, exactly as many myths and spiritual traditions describe the flow of existence. In Hinduism, for example, the universe is seen as going through cycles of creation, srishti, preservation, sthiti, and destruction, pralaya, with each cycle being repeated eternally. Similarly, many spiritual traditions believe that life and death are not isolated events, but parts of a larger cycle where souls continue their journey, being reborn and evolving over several existences. Karma, one of the central laws of Hinduism and Buddhism, suggests that our actions have repercussions that transcend the present life, influencing our future rebirths. This aligns in a way with the idea that everything in the universe is interconnected, and our actions can have profound and lasting impacts. Albert Einstein, with his famous equation E=mc2, showed us that matter and energy are interchangeable. This theory suggests that nothing in the universe is truly destroyed. Everything transforms. Matter converts into energy, energy converts into matter, and so on in an endless cycle. This scientific idea that continuous transformation is the basis of physical reality echoes the spiritual ideas about the cyclical nature of existence. In quantum physics, the concept of non-locality suggests that subatomic particles are connected in a way that transcends space and time. This implies that everything in the universe is intrinsically linked, regardless of the distance separating objects. Similarly, many spiritual traditions teach that consciousness and divine energy are present in all things, uniting the entire universe in a web of spiritual interconnections. The unification of science and spirituality becomes even more evident when we consider the idea that reality is not something fixed, but fluid. In relativistic and quantum physics, we see that what we perceive as reality is, in a way, a construction of our perception. The universe, like life and death, is in constant flux. The line between the physical and the metaphysical begins to blur, and the concept that everything is part of an eternal cycle takes on a new meaning. Therefore, when we look at the universe as a continuous cycle of creation, destruction, and rebirth, we can better understand the role of life and death not as final events, but as natural transitions within an infinite process. The laws of physics and spiritual teachings can be seen as two different ways of describing the same universal truth. The universe never ends, it only transforms. One of the most intriguing questions that arises when we reflect on life, death, and existence is, are we truly free in our choices? The concept of free will is central to philosophy, religions, and even cognitive sciences. But does it really exist? Or are we just following a path already determined by factors outside our control? In many philosophical and religious systems, free will is considered the human capacity to make independent decisions without the intervention of fate or external forces. In Christian traditions, for example, it is believed that God gave human beings free will to choose between good and evil, creating a space for morality and personal responsibility. In many schools of philosophical thought, free will is seen as the basis of ethics, where our choices define who we are and what makes us human. On the other hand, modern science, particularly neuroscience and cognitive psychology, questions this idea. Research on decision-making suggests that many of our choices are unconscious and influenced by biological, environmental, and social factors that we are not always aware of. Daniel Kahneman, a psychologist and Nobel laureate, showed that our mind is prone to making quick and automatic decisions based on heuristics, without our being fully aware of the entire process. This implies that what we consider a free decision may, in reality, be the result of influences beyond our conscious control. Furthermore, studies on determinism suggest that all events in the universe, including our choices, may be the result of a chain of causes and effects, governed by the laws of physics and chemistry. This raises the question of whether our actions are truly free, or whether they are, in some way, predetermined by our genes, our past experiences, and even the patterns of the universe. From a quantum perspective, the notion of absolute determinism begins to crumble. The uncertainty and probability that govern the behavior of subatomic particles challenge the idea of a strictly causal universe. According to quantum mechanics, the behavior of particles is unpredictable and governed by probabilities, not by determined causes. This suggests that on a subatomic scale, the universe may be essentially non-deterministic, and perhaps from this, freedom of choice may also be possible on a more fundamental level. However, despite these scientific discoveries, many people still firmly believe in free will, in the idea that we have the power to choose our destinies, to break patterns, and to create our own reality. For many, this belief is a form of empowerment, offering the hope that we can change our circumstances and, ultimately, achieve true spiritual freedom. The dilemma of free will and determinism leads us to a deeper reflection on the role of consciousness. Could it be that true freedom lies in our awareness of ourselves and our ability to reflect on our choices, even if they are influenced by unconscious and external factors? If our perception of freedom is a construct of the mind, perhaps the real question is not whether we are free or not, but how we experience our freedom within the limits imposed on us. What if, in the end, true freedom is not so much the ability to make any choice, but the freedom to perceive and accept the continuous transition of life and death and the eternal cycle of transformation that governs the universe? In this sense, we may be freer than we imagine, for our freedom may reside in our ability to flow with life, accepting what it offers us, and understanding that in the grand scheme of the universe, life is just a part of a continuous cycle that remakes itself at every moment. Death is undoubtedly one of the greatest unknowns that humanity faces. For millennia, philosophers, scientists, theologians, and thinkers have tried to understand the nature of death, what happens after it, and how we can face it serenely. If, as we have seen, death is part of a natural cycle of life and transformation, how can we learn to face it with wisdom and find peace before it? First, it is important to understand that death is not an extinction or an absolute end, but a transition. In many spiritual traditions, such as Buddhism, death is seen as part of a continuous cycle of rebirth. The process of dying is not a definitive end, but a passage to a new form of existence. Buddhism teaches us to see death as an illusion of the ego, which prevents us from understanding the true nature of the impermanence of all things. By accepting death as part of this cycle, we can free ourselves from the fear of the end and live more fully and authentically. This view is shared by many other philosophical and spiritual traditions. In Hinduism, death is seen as a transition of the soul from one body to another. The idea of karma suggests that a person's actions in their current life influence their next incarnation, creating a cycle of interconnected lives where death is not an end but only a part of a process of spiritual evolution. From a scientific perspective, death can be seen as the end of the body's biological functions. However, modern science also suggests that the cycle of life and death may be much more complex than simply the decomposition of tissues and the cessation of bodily functions. Some scientists, like David Bohm, propose that physical death may be just a transition to another form of existence, although our current understanding does not allow us to fully comprehend this transformation. In quantum physics, for example, the idea that subatomic particles can exist in multiple states simultaneously challenges the traditional view that death is the end of existence. This leads us to question whether consciousness in some way transcends the physical body and continues to exist in ways we do not yet fully understand. Death, in this sense, may not be an end, but a change of state. How can we then face death with wisdom? One of the first steps is to accept that death is an inevitable part of existence. It is part of the cycle of birth, life, death, and rebirth that governs the universe. By embracing this impermanence, we can begin to live more authentically, without the constant fear of the end. Epictetus, a Stoic philosopher, said, "Death is something that we all will have to face. What matters is how we live, not how long we live." True wisdom lies in the acceptance that death is not something to be feared, but something to be understood as a natural part of the journey. Furthermore, we need to learn to live in the present, making the most of every moment we have. Death can teach us to be more grateful for life and to value the little things. By living consciously, appreciating every breath and every interaction, we give meaning to our journey, regardless of its duration. One of the best ways to face death with wisdom is to cultivate detachment. This does not mean abandoning the people or things we love, but understanding that everything is transient. Detachment allows us to live more fully as we are not trapped by the fear of loss. Instead, we can live with a peaceful conscience, knowing that everything that is important is present in our being, and that nothing in the physical world can take away the true essence of our existence. Finally, perhaps the greatest wisdom about death is the ability to live with purpose. If we understand that life is part of an eternal cycle of transformation, we can live with the conviction that every action we take, every thought we have, every choice we make, has an impact on the eternal universe. Living with purpose gives us the freedom to live fully and to accept death as a natural transition to the next phase of this eternal journey. In a world that often seems to be racing towards the future, it is easy to forget that the only true reality we have is the present. The concept of eternity may seem distant, but in reality, true eternity exists in the now. The peace we seek is not at some point in the future or in an idealized state of existence, but in the present moment. The first thing we need to understand is that time, as we perceive it, is a construct of our mind. Albert Einstein revolutionized our understanding of time with the theory of relativity, showing that time is relative and can be influenced by gravity and speed. For our everyday experience, this means that time is not an absolute constant. What we call past and future are just mental perceptions that depend on how we relate to the present moment. Many spiritual traditions, including Buddhism and Stoicism, teach the importance of living in the present moment. The Buddha spoke about the power of mindfulness, a practice of living in the now, without getting lost in thoughts about the past or worries about the future. When we anchor ourselves in the present, we can experience a sense of peace that transcends the continuous flow of time. On the other hand, Stoicism teaches us that by accepting the transient nature of time and all things, we can find true freedom. As Seneca wrote in his letters, it is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. The key to peace, then, is to stop chasing an idealized life in the future and start living with intentionality in the now. The problem arises when we become slaves to time. Anxiety about the future, nostalgia for the past, and the feeling that we need to be somewhere else make us lose the reality of the now. Many of us spend our lives seeking something outside of ourselves, an achievement, future happiness, a realization. However, in doing so, we forget that everything we need is already present in our immediate experience. Here, neuroscience also offers valuable insights. The human brain is designed to be constantly evaluating and anticipating, creating future scenarios, but this can also be a trap. Studies show that when we are fully present, our brain waves enter a state of coherence and our body enters a state of balance, reducing stress and promoting mental and physical health. The true freedom of time is to live fully in the moment without being bound by the chains of the past or the future. When we free ourselves from temporal anxiety, we can perceive eternity in the present, because in truth, the present is all we really have. Every breath we take, every moment of consciousness we have, is an expression of the eternity that is available to us. By accepting the now, we can access an inner peace that does not depend on external circumstances. Finding peace in the now does not mean neglecting the future or ignoring the past. It means being able to act wisely in relation to the future, but without being consumed by it, and learning from the past, but without being trapped by it. The true power lies in the ability to perceive life clearly, recognizing that the future is just an extension of the present, and that the past no longer exists except in our memories. Ultimately, peace in the now is achieved when we understand that time is not something we should control or fear, but something we should experience with presence and acceptance. When we live with this awareness, we find true freedom and can face life and death as natural parts of an eternal cycle, where each moment is precious and carries within it the eternity of the universe. The idea that we are separate individuals living our lives in isolation is one of the deepest-seated beliefs in our culture. However, throughout history, many spiritual traditions and more recently areas of physics and neuroscience have suggested that the separation between individuals may be an illusion. The idea of a collective consciousness, where we are all interconnected in some way, may seem like an abstract concept, but it is gaining more attention in the modern world. The concept of collective consciousness was introduced by the Swiss psychologist Carl Jung in the early 20th century. For Jung, the collective consciousness was a deep layer of the human psyche that shares universal symbols, myths, and experiences. He believed that all human beings, regardless of their culture or individual history, possess a common collective mind, which is reflected in our beliefs, archetypes, and shared stories. What he proposed was that, in some way, we are all connected, not only on a physical level, but also on a psychological and spiritual level. This idea of an invisible network of human connections, transcending physical and temporal boundaries, has found parallels in quantum physics. The theory of quantum entanglement, for example, suggests that particles that were once in contact can continue to influence each other instantly, regardless of the distance between them. Some scientists and thinkers have speculated that this quantum interconnection could be the key to understanding the nature of collective consciousness. If subatomic particles can be connected instantaneously, could our minds also be intertwined in ways we do not yet fully understand? Furthermore, neuroscience has also pointed to a phenomenon known as neural mirroring. Mirror neurons in our brains are responsible for allowing us to understand the emotions and intentions of others simply by observing their actions. This process suggests that we are biologically programmed to connect with and empathize with others deeply and instinctively. This raises the question, is human consciousness in some way shared? Could it be that, by connecting with each other, we are in fact accessing a part of a global consciousness, a network of human experiences that transcends the limits of the body and mind? This notion of interconnection is also reflected in some spiritual traditions. In Hinduism, the idea of Atman and Brahman suggests that the individual soul, Atman, is in fact connected to the universal soul, Brahman, forming a divine unity. Similarly, in Buddhism, the concept of interdependence teaches that all beings are deeply connected and that there are no truly isolated beings or events. Separation is seen as an illusion created by the mind, and by understanding the true nature of reality, we can perceive our connection with everything that exists. On a more practical level, modern technology has facilitated our connections on a global scale. With the internet and social media, we are more interconnected than ever, sharing ideas, emotions, and experiences in real time. This digital collective consciousness can be seen as a reflection of our interconnection, albeit in a more superficial and material way. But it is still a demonstration of the human desire to share and connect with others on a deeper level. The question then is, how can we access and enhance this collective consciousness in a more conscious and intentional way? The answer may lie in practices of meditation, introspection, and empathy. When meditating, for example, many people report a feeling of expansion of consciousness, where they feel more connected with others and with the universe as a whole. This can be seen as a way to access the collective consciousness, a space where there is no separation between the self and the other. Furthermore, we can cultivate empathy and understanding as tools to expand our connection with others. When we can feel what the other feels, we understand that our individual experience is not isolated, but part of something much larger. We are indeed all connected by an invisible network of human experiences, emotions, and thoughts. The challenge, then, is not only to perceive this connection, but to live in accordance with it. By recognizing our interdependence, we can make more conscious decisions, act with more compassion, and collaborate more harmoniously for the collective good. Collective consciousness is not just a philosophical abstraction, but a reality experienced in our daily actions, in the relationships we build, and in the choices we make together. At some point in our lives, we all face the fundamental question: what is the meaning of life? The search for purpose is one of the deepest and most universal motivations of humanity. But often, this search also leads us to question death. If life is so fleeting and full of challenges, what is the true purpose of our existence? And when we reach the end, how can we find meaning in our departure from this world? To answer these questions, we need to understand life and death not as isolated events, but as part of a continuous journey. In many spiritual traditions, life and death are seen as parts of an eternal cycle of rebirth and transformation. In Buddhism, for example, the wheel of life symbolizes the interdependence of all phenomena, where birth, life, and death are all connected. Death is not the end, but a transition that leads to a new phase of existence. Similarly, the Christian vision of resurrection suggests that death is not an absolute end, but a passage to a new life. This concept of continuous renewal is present in many cultures and philosophies, such as in Hinduism, which teaches about the cycle of samsara, where souls are reincarnated, learning and evolving with each new life. When we look at death in this way, as part of a cycle of evolution and learning, it loses its character of an absolute end and becomes an opportunity for transformation. Death does not deprive us of the meaning of life, but challenges us to give a deeper purpose to everything we do, knowing that our actions, thoughts, and feelings have an impact beyond the time we spend in the physical body. Living with purpose is the key to finding meaning in our journey. The meaning of life is not something that is given to us externally or imposed by someone else, but something we must create and cultivate throughout our existence. We can find purpose in our relationships, in our work, in our passions, and above all, in the positive impact we have on others and on the world around us. The search for purpose is deeply related to our ability to live in the present. As we saw in previous chapters, life happens now. Every moment we have is an opportunity to live with meaning, to act with clear intentions, and to contribute to something greater than ourselves. When we live consciously and with purpose, we find a deep meaning in life, even in the face of death. This leads us to reflect on how we can face death not with fear or sadness, but as a natural part of the journey. Death is the end point of our physical existence, but it does not need to be seen as a definitive end. If we believe in the impermanence of all things and understand death as part of a continuous cycle of transformation, we can accept it as an inevitable but not frightening transition. The true question is not when or how we will die, but how we will live until then. Finding meaning in death also involves legacy. What do we leave behind? How does our life impact future generations? What can we do to make our presence in this world meaningful, not just for us, but for everyone around us? The legacy we leave does not need to be material or grandiose, but it can be the love we spread, the good deeds we perform, the ideas we share, and the lives we touch. Death reminds us of the fragility of life, and it is precisely this fragility that gives value to every moment. When we accept that life is finite, we begin to live more consciously, more present, more fully. The meaning of life is not in seeking physical immortality, but in finding complete fulfillment and contentment while we live. Furthermore, the meaning of life is also in learning to deal with death. We cannot control it, but we can control how we see it. By accepting death as part of the cycle, we can find a balance that allows us to live with more wisdom, more grace, and more peace. When we learn to see death not as something to be feared, but as a natural and inevitable end, we can live with more courage and fewer regrets. Ultimately, the infinite journey is one that we transcend throughout our life and beyond. Finding meaning in life and death is accepting that both are part of an eternal process of transformation and evolution. True wisdom is to live in a way that embraces the cycle of existence, with all its ups and downs, and to understand that each moment is an opportunity for growth and learning until the last breath. The now is the only real moment we have. The past is gone, and the future has not yet arrived. However, it is common for us to spend most of our time in the past or the future, burdened by regrets or worries. We live in an age where time is one of the most precious commodities, and paradoxically, it is also what we waste the most by not being fully present. How can we then cultivate the wisdom of now and live more consciously, fully, and at peace with ourselves? Mindfulness is the key to unlocking the wisdom of now. Practicing presence is learning to observe the present moment without judgment, without distractions or haste. When we are truly present, we are able to experience life with all its details, its colors, sounds, and emotions. This creates a sense of deep connection with reality, without the filters of anxiety or distraction. Scientific studies show that the practice of mindfulness has tangible benefits for our mental and physical health. Through meditation and mindfulness, we can reduce stress levels, improve concentration, increase emotional intelligence, and even strengthen the immune system. But for the wisdom of now to have a real impact on our lives, it must be more than just a meditation practice. It must be a way of life. The philosopher Eckhart Tolle popularized the idea of living fully in the present moment in his book, The Power of Now, where he argues that the biggest obstacle to our inner peace is our identification with the mind. In other words, our worries, anxieties, and limiting beliefs often keep us trapped in the past or the future. For Tolle, the mind is a tool, not an identity. By detaching from the mind and the need to control everything, we can access a state of deep peace, as we realize that life is already happening, regardless of what we think or desire. The wisdom of now is also closely linked to acceptance. Acceptance does not mean resignation or passivity, but rather recognizing what is and what is happening without resistance. When we resist the moment, we create unnecessary suffering. This does not mean that we should accept abuse or harmful situations, but that we should accept what is beyond our control and learn to react in a more balanced and wise way. The impermanent nature of life is another important lesson of the now. By understanding that everything is fleeting, we learn to value what we have now without clinging to the idea that things should be a certain way or last forever. Impermanence is one of the most powerful universal laws, and accepting this frees us from anxiety about the future and attachment to the past. The now is all the time we need to be happy, to enjoy life, and to build our inner peace. In a world that constantly distracts us with notifications, tasks, and expectations, the wisdom of now is a true act of rebellion against external pressure. By focusing on the present, we begin to see the beauty in the little things, the sound of laughter, the warmth of the sun on our face, the feeling of being alive. True inner peace is not in achieving some distant goal or having everything under control, but in accepting and embracing the simplicity of the moment. To incorporate the wisdom of now into our daily life, we can start with small steps. Slow down and be more attentive to what we do in the present. When you are with someone, listen carefully, without rushing to respond. When you eat, savor the taste and texture of the food. Instead of getting lost in worries about the future, take a few minutes to breathe deeply and reconnect with the moment. Furthermore, by practicing self-compassion, we can learn to forgive ourselves for past mistakes and release future worries. This allows us to live with more freedom and less judgment, creating space for inner peace. The wisdom of now is not something that is achieved once, but something that we must practice constantly, moment by moment. Finally, living fully in the now does not mean ignoring future needs or lessons from the past. It means, in fact, integrating these elements in a healthy way. By learning from the past, planning for the future, and at the same time living in the present, we create a balanced cycle of action and reflection, where inner peace can be cultivated at every moment. The wisdom of now teaches us that by ceasing to fight against the present and fully accepting it, we find the inner peace we so desperately seek. The present moment is the only place where we can act, feel, and be truly alive. By embracing the now, we create a more meaningful, rich life, at peace with the constant flow of existence. Have you ever wondered what the maximum potential of your mind would be? What would you be capable of achieving if you were truly awake and fully aware of your capabilities? In a world where we are constantly encouraged to chase external goals, we often forget to explore the vast depth of what is possible within us. The awakening of consciousness is the first step to accessing this unlimited potential of the human mind. But what does it really mean to awaken consciousness? For many, this is synonymous with profound self-knowledge, a state in which we begin to perceive not only our thoughts but also the mental process behind them. When we are truly conscious, we begin to notice patterns, limiting beliefs, and automatic habits that control our lives without us realizing it. Awakening is, therefore, a journey of liberation, where we cease to be enslaved by our own thoughts and begin to act with more clarity, intention, and purpose. The first step to awakening consciousness is learning to observe the mind. Instead of being dragged by emotions, reactions, and automatic thoughts, you begin to distance yourself from them, adopting an internal observer position. This allows us to make more rational, more conscious, and more aligned decisions with our true self. Meditation and mindfulness practices are powerful tools for this process, as they help us create a healthy distance between ourselves and our thoughts. The awakening of consciousness also involves a deeper understanding of the nature of reality. Many of the obstacles we face in life do not come from the external world, but from our perception of it. As perceivers of reality, our mind has the power to shape how we see the world and, consequently, how we relate to it. The awakening of consciousness allows us to question the assumptions we have about ourselves and the world around us, challenging self-imposed limitations and expanding our vision to new possibilities. One of the greatest limitations of human beings is identification with the mind. Throughout life, we begin to believe that we are our thoughts, our emotions, and even our body. However, true wisdom lies in realizing that we are much more than that. We are conscious beings, capable of observing and influencing our thoughts, emotions, and actions. When we awaken to this fact, we can begin to detach from old identities and beliefs, allowing a more authentic version of ourselves to emerge. Furthermore, the awakening of consciousness involves expanding the mind to new possibilities. This does not mean just accumulating knowledge, but cultivating an open mind, willing to learn, experiment, and evolve. The human brain is extraordinarily plastic, capable of forming new connections and creating new neurostructures throughout life. This means that we are never stuck in our current condition. Change is possible at any stage of life, and the key to unlocking this change lies in our mind. Neuroscience has shown that practices such as meditation, physical exercise, and continuous learning are essential to stimulate the brain and increase our cognitive capacity. By challenging the mind with new experiences, learning, and practices, we can literally expand our consciousness and access higher levels of human potential. This makes us more creative, more intelligent, and more capable of dealing with life's adversities. Moreover, the awakening of consciousness also involves a deep sense of connection. When we are fully aware of our interconnection with others and with the universe, our perspective changes completely. Instead of living in isolation, seeking only personal success, we begin to see the value of collaboration, empathy, and compassion. This does not mean renouncing our own well-being, but understanding that our personal fulfillment is closely linked to the collective well-being. Expanded consciousness also allows us to access states of flow, where time seems to stop and we are completely immersed in an activity with total focus and productivity. The state of flow is one where we feel a unity with what we are doing, where our skills align perfectly with the challenge we are facing. This state of high performance is a manifestation of the maximum potential of the human mind and is accessible to all, as long as we are truly present and conscious. To achieve the awakening of consciousness and reach our maximum potential, we also need daily practice. is not a one-time event, but a continuous commitment to personal growth and the expansion of our perception. Self-development is never a linear process, and each day is an opportunity to evolve. The key is to commit to the journey, learn to learn, and remain open to the infinite possibilities that the awakening of the mind can bring. Finally, the awakening of consciousness is not an end in itself, but a door to something even deeper. As the mind expands and becomes more aware of its nature and potential, we are called to use this power for something greater than ourselves, to serve the greater good, to contribute to collective evolution, and to create a lasting impact on the world around us. Life is a constant journey of growth and evolution, where each day offers us a new opportunity to become better versions of ourselves. But what does it really mean to grow and evolve continuously? How can we keep the flame of transformation burning even when challenges seem endless and obstacles accumulate in our path? The answer lies in adopting a mindset of continuous learning and understanding that growth is not a destination, but an endless journey. The first step to continuing to grow is to accept the impermanence of life. Change is the only constant in the universe, and by understanding that nothing remains the same, we can begin to see personal evolution as something natural and inevitable. No matter where we are now or what we have already achieved, there is always more to learn, more to conquer, and more to explore. The key to this mindset is to detach from the idea that we already know everything, or that we have already reached our peak of development. When we cease to be fixed in our beliefs and perspectives, we open the door to infinite growth. Continuous learning is the foundation for daily evolution. In a world that is constantly changing, knowledge is a powerful tool to keep us updated and prepared for the challenges that arise. However, learning is not just about acquiring information, but also reflecting and integrating what we learn into our lives. Every experience, whether positive or negative, offers a lesson. By focusing on what we can learn from each situation, we transform each difficulty into an opportunity to grow. It is essential to remember that personal growth does not happen overnight. It is a gradual and often imperceptible process where small changes accumulate and, over time, generate great transformations. Therefore, it is important to be patient and kind to yourself. Real growth takes time, and each stage of the journey is valid. It is not about the speed of progress, but about the commitment to keep moving forward, regardless of the difficulties. Furthermore, it is essential to celebrate the small victories along the way. Often, we are so focused on the next goal that we forget to acknowledge how much we have already achieved. By celebrating progress, however small, we reinforce our confidence and motivation to continue. Recognizing our achievements helps us maintain a positive mindset and see how much we are, in fact, evolving. Another important aspect of the endless journey is constant adaptation. The circumstances around us are constantly changing, and this requires us to continually adjust to deal with new situations and challenges. Mental flexibility is crucial in this process. By learning to adapt to changes and seeing difficulties as opportunities for growth, we develop the resilience needed to move forward, even in times of adversity. Growth also involves expanding our comfort zone. Often, we get stuck in patterns and habits that are comfortable but limiting. To continue evolving, it is necessary to step out of this comfort zone and face new challenges, even if it causes temporary discomfort. True evolution happens when we force ourselves to go beyond what we already know and are willing to learn new skills, explore new ideas, and expose ourselves to new experiences. Additionally, the practice of daily reflection is essential for constant growth. Taking time each day to reflect on our actions, choices, and feelings helps us identify areas where we can improve. Constructive self-criticism allows us to identify our strengths and weaknesses so that we can consciously work on our evolution. Reflection helps us adjust the course of our journey, learn from mistakes, and improve future decisions. Another key to continuous growth is profound self-knowledge. The more we understand who we really are, the easier it becomes to identify our values, passions, and goals. Self-knowledge allows us to make decisions more aligned with our essence and helps us find purpose in each stage of the journey. Introspection is a daily exercise that allows us to adjust our actions according to our inner truth. Moreover, it is important to recognize that growth is not a solitary journey. The support of mentors, colleagues, and communities can be fundamental to our development. By surrounding ourselves with people who share our vision of growth, we can learn from their experiences, exchange ideas, and inspire each other. The exchange of knowledge and collaboration are essential to accelerate our personal evolution. The community strengthens the growth process by providing emotional support, guidance, and new perspectives. The journey of growth and evolution is also deeply connected to the practice of gratitude. By focusing on what we already have and what we have already achieved, we cultivate a mindset of abundance, which allows us to attract more opportunities for growth. Gratitude helps us maintain a positive attitude, even in difficult times, and to see that each challenge has a greater purpose in our development. Finally, true evolution is in enjoying the journey. Often we are so focused on reaching the next goal that we forget to enjoy the process. The journey of growth is, in fact, what transforms us. By learning to enjoy the path, instead of focusing only on the destination, we find more meaning, more joy, and more fulfillment.